Hello, welcome to Forest Focus as we welcome two friends of the show in a commentator special to discuss the relegation battle, Nottingham Forest players in the World Cup, and potentially our favourite chocolate bars. So with that in mind, it's great to welcome, first of all, Sky Sports' Seb Hutchinson. Seb, good to have you back. How are you doing?
Yeah, hi Matt. I have to say credit to you for getting the current Forest manager on your pod. I think that says a lot about how well your pod's been doing, and I think that's brilliant. So congratulations.
No, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations for all you do. I don't know how to respond when people say nice stuff, but thank you. TNT Sports is Adam Summerton. How are you doing?
Very well, and I would echo those sentiments. Yeah, fantastic. You've put in a lot of hard work, and to see something like that, well, it just popped up on my Twitter feed, and I was like, "Get in there, well done, Matt." Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, I love that.
Thank you. If people haven't checked out the Vitor Pereira interview, then do it because it was really good fun and great to have him on. Hopefully, we'll have a couple of decent bits coming up between now and the summer as well. But looking forward to this one in the very short term. Do you guys see each other much? I know you told me before we started recording you work together, but is this a bit like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters? The world ends if a Sky Sports commentator meets a TNT one, because one of you has one game, one of you has the other one. You probably don't. You're not in each other's person very much. So is it nice to see each other?
You don't
I don't
tend
think
to see.
no, I
You
don't
don't
think
tend
I've
to
ever
see
been at
much.
a game when Adam's been at a game
No,
because I don't
it's,
cover the Champions League or European football. And then if it's a Premier League night, then TNT have it's a midday game that's usually world feed sometimes, and I don't if I do world feed, it's never really that slot. So yeah, I don't think it's ever happened.
no, you don't tend
No.
to. I mean, Mark Scott's one of my best mates and the
Mm.
match of the day commentator, and very often he'll text me saying, "Are you at this? You know, when we've got a Premier League midweek." And it does work out occasionally. In fact, it did recently, but not that often. Yeah, commentators. It's sometimes if you see somebody who's maybe doing a world feed game, like you might
Mm.
see them then, but yeah, you don't see that much of each other really.
No.
So it's quite strange in that respect. But yeah,
It's
you
quite
always
a
have a
lonely
look down the
job, isn't it?
gantry, Susan.
I'm
Say
getting a
again,
bit
sorry.
existential, but it's quite a lonely job. You know, you're traipsing the motorway at midnight, Adam. Seb's always
Mm.
back and forth. It's not, it's not a normal job in any sense,
Uh,
is it? I
Well,
suppose.
those M1 motorway closures
Oh
late
yeah.
at night are the absolute bane of my life, I can tell you. Yeah, I did Italy last night, and Secrets of Telly, I did it off tube from London, coming back to Nottingham.
No, I'm joking.
And yeah, and yeah, it was they just decided to just close the M1, and yeah, so it took me. I think I got home at 2 a.m. I'm not expecting little violins or anything like that. You know, I literally talk about football for a job. I mean, it could be it could be a lot harder, but yeah, I hate motorway closures when you
Yeah.
just want to get home after a
No one
game.
wants to drive through Slough at 1 a.m. on the way back to Nottingham, do they? Or Stevenage or wherever it
What's
is.
wrong with
No.
those places, Matt?
I
You got to
assume
be careful nowadays. Any
I
town,
think
don't pick on a town.
I think demographics probably low enough in Slough and Stevenage I can get away from it.
Yeah.
I would imagine our audience numbers. Yeah, right. Let's get into it then. I want to just pick the chaps' brains about the relegation battle, primarily looking at all four teams. So starting with Forest, Seb. We spent weeks and weeks and weeks saying we can't score a goal. Who's going to score the goals? I think we've actually got 12 in 9 under Pereira, although they've come in batches as they have all season. After seeing us v Spurs, do you think we've solved that problem? We're going to be all right, or was the Spurs game a bit of a red herring because they were terrible that second half?
I don't think Tottenham can be a marker for anybody at the moment. I think that's the problem you have. I think even when they drew against Liverpool, that was more about Liverpool watching that game than it was about Tottenham. But what it did tell me about Forest was that away from home this season, they've picked up some big results. And at the start of the campaign, my belief was that it was going to be the home form. I actually made one of those hot takes that essentially home form was what was going to drive Forest's season, and I made a prediction that they'd only lose a couple of home games all season. Obviously, that's gone wrong. It's flipped. It's actually been the complete opposite, and the away form hasn't been that surprising. Those big results, I think, going to Spurs and winning, I wasn't that surprised because I'd seen Forest win at Brentford. I'd seen, big wins that they've had. Anfield. They've gone away from home in certain games and really picked up the points. West Ham United did that one as well. Um, And that might be it. Who would have thought? Maybe that tension of being in front of your home supporters, as Tottenham have found. Leeds, it's been a bit different, obviously. And I mean, West Ham, they've always had issues at home in terms of getting the fans on board. But that's what struck from me, was it felt, right, is it going to be the away form? Even in the Europa League, you think about the turnaround in the second leg at Michelin, these are going to be the situation that might put them in an excellent step when it comes to maybe winning that competition.
I suppose the ironic thing about us, Adam, is we're sat here on the pod talking about the next 2 games are massive, get 4 points, we can feel quite relaxed. Well, they're 2 home games. We've got Villa and Burnley coming up. And as Seb says, we've been terrible at home. So how are you seeing us of late?
Well, I think a key marker that you're looking for in the situation that Forest find themselves in is fight, really. It's fight and spirit, determination, unity, all of those things. And they were all very, very evident, I thought, against Tottenham. I thought they were all very evident away against Manchester City. I thought they were evident away against Midtjylland. And then I compare that with, and I know it's right now an extreme comparison, but I compare it with Tottenham and it's night and day. And if you're looking at a team that's got the minerals, if I can put it like that, to stay up, you'd look at it and you think Forest. And I stick to what I've said when I've ever been on this pod for a long time now about this group of players. These are good players. And I think they showed it against Tottenham. And again, I know we have to keep saying and underlining the fact that Tottenham are terrible right now. But you know, you look at players like the 2 centre-backs. I mean, they were possibly one of the best centre-back partnerships in the Premier League last season. Sells was one of the best goalkeepers. They were 2 of the best fullbacks. They don't become bad players overnight. I think a lot of Forest problems this season can be explained by the sheer chaos that there's been. You can't go through 4 managers in a season, expect there not to be problems. Of course there's going to be problems, especially when they play so differently as well. I mean, the players have had a lot to contend with in terms of stylistic change, personality change. And I have to credit Pereira, who's come in, because, you know, it would be it would be difficult, you would think, to get it on an even keel, to get that unity and that togetherness. That's not easy. Let's see how De Zerbi does at Tottenham in that respect. That he's got a real job on his hands with that. So for me, I'm so encouraged by those things that I suppose are difficult to measure, but you know them when you see them, don't you, as a football supporter? And Forest have certainly had those in recent weeks. I know there was a disappointing result, wasn't there, at home against Fulham? Clearly, the Burnley game, people will look at it because of, you know, where Burnley are, and they'll say that is a tremendous opportunity for Forest, isn't it, to put another 3 points on the board. With no disrespect to Burnley, but, you know, they are going to be going down, and Forest should be winning that game. So, yeah, those 3 home games in a row that are coming up are absolutely crucial, aren't they, to the season? Obviously, a lot will depend on the first leg in the Europa League, but I'm doing Villa in the Europa League, and I'm wondering whether we might end up with an all Midlands tie in the semi-finals. What a story that would be.
Well, maybe. I can see it happening. What do you make of our Europa League situation, Seb, in terms of how one feeds the other? Because we had a great result in Midtjylland with the fringe players or squad players, however you want to build them, finally really, really showing up. And that feels like it might have changed the dynamic a bit. But is it still a bit of a millstone around our neck in terms of Premier League football? Is it a problem or not?
I think it's easy to say it's a problem, but I remember at the start of the season believing Forest could go deep in the Europa League, and that was because just the sheer number of players that came into the club. And even when we think back a long time ago, we think back to the defeat to Swansea, and that it changed pretty much the whole 11 for that game. But it was actually a reminder of Forest did bring in players of a quality that can certainly help you get deep into the Europa League. And it's certainly at this stage of the season, something that Palace don't have, for example, in the Conference League, is that they have to, if they can change their team in the way Forest have done a lot this season when they've played European matches, those players are good enough to beat a lot of the sides in this competition. I mean, you've beaten Porto already this campaign. So it's any side you face in the latter stages are obviously going to be tricky, but not in the sense you feel like you're going to go into it thinking you're massive underdogs. And that huge squad has been a real help, I think, for European football, not so much the Premier League, because it's caused this chaotic situation where when players come in, they expect to be starting games, they expect to be in the mix week in, week out. And it's been a struggle that potentially could be even tricky. You know, when players get back, it makes it even harder. But I don't know. I always felt, even when they were dropping points in the league phase and struggling a bit, I still backed Forest to turn it around in the second leg to reach the stage they've reached now. So that big squad is a major factor.
I suppose. Go on, Adam. Sorry.
I was just going to say about the Europa League. I think it's a really important thing with it these days is that it's that without the Champions League clubs dropping into it, and you know where you are right from the start. I think that makes a huge difference. And look, if you'd said to me, I agree with Seb. Really, I think I've looked at it and all the way through and thought both Forest and Villa surely have a really good chance of going very deep in this. Would I have said that before, when the Champions League clubs were dropping in and we didn't know who would be dropping in? I don't think I would have had the same conviction about that. And I think you could quite easily make the argument that it was harder to win before the changes. But yeah, for that's another reason why the Europa League these days is such another great opportunity for a trophy, really, for the Premier League clubs, because it is the strongest league.
I suppose people think of Spurs, don't they? Last season, they won the Europa League, but they sacrificed the Premier League. But I don't think this is the same, because Spurs last season, Seb, I mean, their squad was decimated. They were playing the kids and protecting everyone. They're not parallels, are they? I would say.
I mean, you could read into that, but what I would take from that is that the buzz it gave Tottenham supporters at the back end of that season to win that competition, and this is the thing. Time will look at it. If Forest can just squeeze and keep themselves in the Premier League, but win the Europa League, what that does for the club and just the history of the club in general, it just adds to the legacy. And looking down the line, even if, I mean, it's bold to say now because it's difficult for supporters in this moment in time to comprehend this. But if you were to jump forward, say 10 years, and you could say, well, Forest went down that season, but they won the Europa League. You would take that, because the belief is they can bounce back. Maybe they won't bounce back. Maybe they've been in the Championship for a few seasons. Even so, you still can't take away what you've won and what you've achieved on the continental stage. And we only have to look at it. If anybody, when Forest returned to the Premier League, you know, the big push and promotion of them on a global stage was the fact that they're two-time European Cup winners. So these are things that are important to the status of clubs. I think we overlook that a little bit. I think it's hard because of the money of the Premier League. And I'm sure the manager's under the pressure of thinking, well, I have to play my strongest side in the Premier League. Of course I do. But his legacy will be secured if he wins his competition, even if you go down, because I just don't think supporters ever forget this stuff.
I think so. I think we can do both. The next two games.
Spurs did.
Yeah. Just if we win the next two or get 4 points or even 3 points in the next two games, I feel like we can relax a little bit. I'll ask you at the end how many points you think we need, but we'll do a little bit more Forest and then talk about the other teams. Just one word for the Trent Navigation, just quickly. If you're doing something to gigs coming up, there is one today as this comes out, I think. So check out fatsoma.com or gigantic.com. Absolute Bury, Strictly something will come on the screen. Soul Battalion. I was thinking Strictly Ballroom. That's an Australian film, isn't it? Soul Battalion. So check all that out to see what is coming up at the Nav. And thanks ever to those guys for their support. Just quickly, one for you, Adam, on one of our players, Dan and Doy. Some talk of him going back to Italy, back to either Inter or Napoli. Both clubs wanted him in the summer. Quick quote from him after doing well for Switzerland, again on international duty. Right now I'm focused only on Switzerland and Forest, and we'll see what happens at the end of the season because we don't know what will happen in the future. I made a choice to go to England. I'm pretty happy there, but we'll see. We'll see at the end of the season. Doesn't scream that he's loving life in Nottingham, Adam. I think he's going to be a big player for the end of the season. I've got a lot of faith in Dan and Doy. Some might say misplaced. He hasn't done a lot yet, but there's signs of it. Do you think he would go back to Italy as a good fit from what you see of Serie A? Does it make sense, or can he make it here long term?
I would like to think that he will stick around because I still think there's more to come from him. It's you can't argue the fact that it hasn't been a fantastic first season. I think we saw glimpses in his first game as well. I even remember a pre-season friendly against Fiorentina that I actually went to, and I thought, he's looking pretty good here as well. But in terms of where you would expect him to be, but he's certainly not on his own in that respect, is he, in terms of the players that came in? And I think this is a really interesting dynamic with Forest as we look forward, particularly unless they go on and win the Europa League, they're not going to be in Europe next season. It's interesting in terms of the recruitment in the summer, obviously ins and outs. But what I would also look at is that players who were signed last summer who still may come good. I mean, it's not unusual for players to, we've seen some big names in the Premier League over the years struggle for maybe their first 6 to 12 months before they really catch light and go on and have really good careers in England. I think Dan Undoy is a very good player. He showed it again playing with Switzerland. He certainly showed it in Serie A last season when he won the Coppa Italia with Bologna. He got the winning goal in the final. I hope he stays, and I hope that he really digs in and shows what he can do, because I think he's good enough for the Premier League. I think another something that's gone against him, and this is really interesting for me because I watch a lot of different leagues. Italy's the one that I watch the most. And the more I watch these European leagues, and then when I assess who will do well in the Premier League from players who are playing in these different European leagues, the more I assess it right now, the more I look to Ligue 1 as the league where if I were a scout, I think I'd be focusing quite a lot of my attention. Not necessarily because that's where all the best players are or the most promising players. There certainly are a lot of promising players there, but the profile of player for which Premier League clubs seem to be going for, and the profile of player and the way teams are approaching games, which is very physical, very athletic. That for me is where Ligue 1 comes into its own. And I look at the example of Ryan Shirky, who, if you compare him, I know they're not the same players, but there are similarities in style and where they like to pop up on the pitch, what they like to do. With someone like a Florian Wirtz, who's come from the Bundesliga, Xavi Simons, who's come from the Bundesliga. And if you look at Shirky, I think one of the advantages that he's had is he's dealt with the physicality of the Premier League much better than the other two. I think that's a really important thing. So one came from Liga and the other two came from the Bundesliga, which we used to see as like probably our nearest cousin, the Bundesliga, in terms of the style of football, certainly in the energy of the game. But and the reason I bring this up with Undoy is because when I watched him in Italy, if you were, and I said this on this pod when he was signed, if you'd said to me, what's one of his strengths or list his strengths, one of them that I would have said was his strength on the ball. Because so many times he would get the ball, usually in midfield area, and he would brush players off and he would drive on, and he was a really good dribbler of the ball, and they'd struggle to knock him off the ball. What really surprised me was in the early days of this season in the Premier League, I was seeing a guy getting knocked off the ball quite easily. I'm thinking, wow, that really does show to me that a guy whose strength, one of his strengths for me, was his ability to not be knocked off the ball, is suddenly being knocked off it with relative ease in the Premier League. So in my assessment of players, have actually learned quite a bit with Undoy, but I still have faith that he is a good footballer. And look, it's not been easy for any of the new signings with all the change, all the the different managers, the different styles of play. It's not been easy for any guy coming from a foreign league into that Forest side this season. So I understand why fans will be pessimistic. I get that totally. However, I do feel there's more to come from him and others as well.
Yeah, I think we've misused him a bit. He's not. I don't think he's a hug the touchline winger, which lots of our managers have played. So I think that get him inside a bit, and he'll do bits for us, I would hope.
Matt, I do like you saying we've misused him a bit. You could be talking about a lot of players there. even one who's played in Liga in Dylan Bakwa. You could just say, what is going on? It's quite crazy. And to echo Adam's point, it's true. We've seen, Malik Chow, for example, came in for Newcastle. I've seen situations where you look at his profile and you think he's going to dominate all the time, but there's been little incidences when he's been pinned and turned and made to look a bit silly on occasion. Look at Victor Gyökeres, who was an absolute bully in the Portuguese league, struggling to showcase that physicality in the Premier League. It's the thing that really is notable. I mean, we heard Rodri talking about it, in the fact that the reason why he wants to return to Spain principally is that he can coast through games a bit easier in his head. And we hear a lot of people talk about the Premier League and compare it to other clubs in Europe, right? But principally, we're always talking about the elite clubs in Europe. That's what we're talking about. And they're always going to have top players because they're huge names in the game. But as far as the rest of Europe is concerned, the Premier League has that advantage, and players find that when they come to play in the top flight in England.
Yeah, we could go off on a big tangent. It's interesting. I was just Googling Sunderland signings while you were chatting away there. They signed a couple of players from France. Mukiele, Diarra, Alderete's been a good signing as well, but he came from Spain. So it's interesting how teams recruit, and we'll do a
Doku,
bit.
Look at Doku as for a winger. He's had absolutely no problem coming into the Premier League. Same with on the Cherky line when Rafinha came in, he'd had time in France, took to the league well. So absolutely.
Look at the battering Neymar took when he played in France. I mean, the guy was kicked from pillar to post, wasn't he? So it's really interesting. I'd love to actually sit down with a Premier League club's recruitment team and just say to them, when you're looking at these different leagues and you're profiling players, what is that something that you take into consideration now as the Premier League changes in? We could have another debate, couldn't we, about do we like the direction the Premier League is going in? Is it as attractive as it could be? But if you're buying players to be successful in a particular league, I think it's really relevant. And one thing that really interests me on this debate with Forest is that it's been quite clear to me, not just from players that they've signed, but from players they've been strongly linked with as well, that Forest right now seem to have a real eye on Serie A. They seem to see that as fertile ground for them. I presume that they've got guys on the ground there. They must have, from the amount of players that they've been linked with, because that's how they get linked. Usually people see, people sometimes see representatives in stadiums and things like that. So yeah, I wonder why they've looked particularly there at that league. I know they've looked at others, as Seb says, someone like Back was coming from somewhere else. But I think it's a really interesting debate, because recruitment, as someone in football once said to me, they either said it was 80% or 90% of everything, in terms of are you going to be a success? So it's so important, and it will be again for Forest in the summer. But how they approach that is going to be really interesting. Yeah,
it's funny how leagues come in and out of fashion. I remember we signed Awoniyi, Mangala, Niakate, and we came all from the Bundesliga, and then we looked to Brazil. Unfortunately, John Texas gone bankrupt or being booted out apparently, so we might be looking to Brazil a little bit less now. Although we'll do a Danilo bit shortly, but yeah, it does fits and starts and fashions. Certainly, it's interesting. Right, I want to talk about all the other clubs at the bottom quickly to get their thoughts, and we're rattling on, going off on interesting tangents. Spurs are probably the big topic at the moment. So De Zerbi's come in. I've got thoughts on the appointment, but we're interested to hear yours in terms of what Spurs have done. Good move, bad move, no idea move.
I mean, we're talking about Forest and going through managers and trying to get an identity, and I get this feeling that Spurs are operating a club that's not in the relegation zone. I think he's a manager that you sign in the summer and set a project and sign the players for him. I mean, when I think about De Zerbi, I love watching his teams play when they're at their best. He's been in this position where he's always had to be the underdog in many senses, and sticking his neck out and saying, this is how my team plays, and imposing himself. But I remember this season I covered, said I didn't do the Champions League, but I did do a Champions League game between Marseille and Liverpool, and I just could not believe the way that Marseille were playing. And it's a way of playing it feels so high risk, but if you had the best players in the world, it would be exceptional football. But I can see him getting frustrated on the touchline with his players when he's asking them to do things. That he has this style of this short passing, creating triangles whereby the opposition is sucked in and he can create space elsewhere. But your players have to be on that. The centre half at the time for Marseille, he was really struggling with Liverpool's press, and every single time he kept giving the ball away and Liverpool were in on their goal. Liverpool didn't even have to play that well and really cruise to a victory in that game. I have absolutely no idea how this is going to work for Spurs in the games they have remaining. It seems quite interesting that they've gone this route, and you could see it exploding in a way, but I just felt, why? I suppose they can't afford to wait till the summer, and maybe they're just trying something so different that they hope that he'll get in there and he'll shake the players up, and they'll remember that they're players that are good enough to be playing in the Premier League, and it will work. I don't know. It feels so unknown, and it feels so strange that they've gone this route. But is it strange considering where they are? Maybe not.
It reminds me of, I suppose it's a bit like when we appointed Ange and it was just a huge departure. Spurs did have Ange, so a lot of these players know that, but I don't know, it feels very risky to me, Adam, when you think of, like Seb says, players with their chins on the floor and you're getting them to play a totally different kind of football with a manager who is basically the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket, as far as I can tell, when it comes to man management. I mean, I don't know how some of these
not to do a spoiler. I don't know if you know what happened to him in that.
Yeah, I know what happened to him. Yeah, but in terms of man management style, yeah, I don't know. It feels risky to me. What do you think, Adam?
Well, I think it would probably be apt, really, for me to hand over to Lewis Dunk here, because I can remember, and I've just got the quotes back up again here, what he said about when De Zerbi went in at Brighton, and for me, I can't believe the Tottenham recruitment team haven't read these quotes, but when you bear in mind the circumstances that he goes into, I think they're so relevant. He said, if I'm being honest, the first couple of weeks were horrendous. I wouldn't say horrendous. They were baffling. The first meeting we went into, I was so confused who to look at, what to listen to, and you slowly pick up. Basically, don't listen to the manager, wait for the translator to speak, and you get there in the end. Training changed dramatically. We worked on a lot of different stuff, and the first couple of weeks were a really hard transition. We were fourth in the league when Graham left, and we were flying with him, and it was a strange time for him to go. And then Roberto came in, and it was carnage for 2 weeks. Now, he may tailor things differently for what he's about to go into now, but I think what's undeniable with De Zerbi is that he asks a lot of players in terms of physicality and energy. He's very passionate. He's very animated. He falls out with people, particularly those above him. He's not necessarily the best at managing upwards. Is he the right guy for what he's coming into? What Seb said rings true, I think, that were this August or July or June, you could understand it a bit more. But to come in now, I'm not saying it won't work, because it would be unfair, to before the guy's even managed literally one game to say that he's going to be a failure. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, if you look at his body of work, you look at his history, you look at his personality, you look how he manages up, you look at the clubs that he's been in charge of, none of that fits what Spurs are in, what the situation that they're in now. So it's a massive, massive risk.
Matt, you're loving every word of this, aren't you?
In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, but it could work. They only need to win 2 games, and then we all look a bit silly. But it's just like the whole, and we wouldn't get into it now, but the Mason Greenwood thing has divided the Spurs fan base at a time when you need to have people on side. I mean, as Adam said, if he's smart, he'll do like the De Zerbi light version of this all, and just try and put an arm around them and change a few things. But he doesn't strike me as the manager that's going to do that. He's just so headstrong.
He has to tailor it for the circumstances he's finding himself in. It's so important. And look, maybe we'll learn more about his versatility as a person and as a coach. I'm saying all this about we can only judge on what we've seen, can't we? We can't judge on the future. So if we judge on what we've seen, and we judge on things like those quotes from Lewis Dunk, who was in the dressing room with him, then it looks like a gigantic risk. However, we can all adapt to our situations. We have to do it as commentators. Even in a 90 minutes, something might go wrong. A piece of equipment might go down. You have to adapt. You learn about people in circumstances like that. Maybe we'll learn that De Zerbi's got more in his armory than I'm and others are giving him credit for. So it's going to be really interesting.
Let's do a bit on West Ham and Leeds. I've got loads on the agenda we're just not going to get to, but that's okay. West Ham, Seb, it feels like every time I turn a West Ham game on, you're doing it. So I think you've seen quite a lot of them. Next game is Wolves, which is massive. Then they've got this run of fixtures, which on paper looks tough to me. I think they've got Palace, Everton, Brentford, Arsenal, Newcastle, then a final day against Leeds. Tricky fixtures, but if they win against West Ham, against Wolves, is it really on for them? How do you see West Ham?
Well, what we need to stop doing is looking at the fixtures, because what we've seen is the Premier League feels so condensed this season that the bottom side can take points off the top side, and it's just not really a shock anymore. So I would say even West Ham facing Wolves, that's just not easy for them. I mean, Wolves have been taking points off everybody recently. They've been taking points off, big sides in the league. They beat Liverpool, beat Villa, drew with Arsenal. I did their game at Brentford. They were good value in that. I did the game at Manchester United. They were good value at that. I did their game at Spurs when they should have won and they were denied right at the end. And then you look at the table and you see where they are and you think, what is going on here? But yeah, if you look at the league, you look how many teams are still in with a chance of the Champions League. You know, Arsenal haven't managed to pull away at the top. You think we've got 4 sides now competing for that final pace to stay up, essentially, or to avoid going down, essentially. And it's so tight. So we can't look at you cannot look at the fixtures and think, right, this is great. I mean, Forest had it with Wolves. You think, right, these are games, we've got to go there, we've got to win this match. Even Fulham at home is disappointing, but are you telling me Fulham are not a good side that could take points off anybody? Of course they are. So I'm doing I'm across so many of the relegation games over the next month or so. I mean, it's crazy. I think I've got Leeds when they go to Manchester United. I've got them playing at home on a Friday night. Burnley against Burnley. I've got West Ham Palace going to Palace. West Ham against Wolves. I've got Forest at Sunderland. These are huge. These are the times in the season where every single win is going to feel massive. It's not much between these teams. And West Ham have hit a nice run. They're playing some of their best football of the season at the moment. But will it be enough because of the quality of the opposition? That point against Manchester City, I mean, you probably couldn't believe it in that game, thinking, right, we've got the bonus point against Manchester City, and look at what West Ham are doing. Things go for you. There's moments in matches that can change everything. Spurs go to Anfield, everyone's expecting them to lose. They get the point. Next minute, they're getting thrashed at home, essentially, on the score sheet by Forest. But even in that game, that first half against Forest, Spurs weren't that bad. But the moment Forest got that goal, you felt the whole crowd deflate. You felt that the game had escaped from them. That could be the case for West Ham if Wolves go in front. It is edge of your seat time for every club involved in this. And that's what makes it so tense. I don't know what you want me to say about West Ham to make you feel a bit better, but they're a side perfectly capable of being battered one week and winning the next. Villa, they should have lost by a heavier margin. I don't expect Villa to do to Forest what they did to West Ham, but the nature of the Premier League means who knows.
I think they're just a strange team, West Ham. I've watched them. I think they play quite well, and they've shipped 5 goals to Liverpool, and then I think they've played not so well, and then they've got a win. So I think they're just quite unpredictable. They've got good players, and Nuno's definitely got more of a tune out of them. But I still question how strong any of these teams at the bottom are. Like, I throw us in as well. I mean, how many points, I suppose, Adam, do you think we need anyone to stay up? Because West Ham have got 29, Spurs 30, Forest 32, Leeds 33. We haven't really touched on, but they're in a slightly better position, but still very much in it. I mean, do you see any of the teams, us included, winning 3 or 4 of their final 7 games? I'm not sure I do. I don't know. Do you?
Well, I mean, as Seb has very well illustrated there, it's so hard to predict, isn't it? Because you just get these results come the end of a season when so much is at stake, and then you get other teams where there's not so much at stake. If you end up playing a mid-table team that's on the beach, as people put it, you might get a result that perhaps you're not quite expecting. So it's very hard to predict. I mean, a lot of people have been saying for a while that it might be that magical 40-point mark again that has somehow sort of disappeared really over recent years, hasn't it? But I know that I must sound like the eternal optimist whenever I come on this pod, but I'd just be amazed if Forest didn't get let's say it's 38 points.
Yeah, it's only 2 wins out of the final 7. I mean,
it's 2 wins.
To get that.
I can't believe that Forest team that I've watched away at Spurs and away at Midtjylland, away at Man City, I can't believe that they don't get 6 points in how many games left is it? 7.
Yeah.
I just maybe I'm being too optimistic. I don't know. I'm sort of Forest fans. There might be some shouting at their.
Looking at the remaining fixtures, right? The one I think is the hardest fixture I think Forest have left is Manchester United away.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Chelsea away is something to target. Certainly think so. Sunderland away is something to target because Sunderland, you feel like if a team you think is the closest to being on the beach, it might just be Sunderland in term thinking they won't go down now. And will they have the push to really get into Europe? It's unlikely. Could level that at Bournemouth, perhaps. But Bournemouth are on a good unbeaten run. Sunderland have lost their home record recently. They've lost a couple of home matches. So that's something to target. And it's those away matches where we know Forest have excelled, but weirdly, they've got more home matches now, which is what you usually want. Having Bournemouth on the last day, it's just everything about it. Every fixture you look at makes you nervous. I'd be more confident. Forest have to beat Burnley. They just have to.
Yeah.
If they don't win that game, that's the one for me. I think that's the pivotal game of the season, because in the next couple of games, just picking up 3 points. 3 points means so much more when you're down the bottom than it does at the top. The teams near the top, they can win, although it's not happened this season, funnily enough, but, win 4 or 5 games in a row and it's nothing. Just putting together winning one game in 3 matches is worth, obviously more, literally is worth more than drawing 2 and losing 1. Even though you might think you've played well and you've hung in, you've got an important point, the wins are everything right now. And if Forest could, these next 2 home games, getting even a point at home to Villa and then beating Burnley, that's going to be a struggle. Not necessarily, I'm not thinking of Tottenham per se, but I am thinking of West Ham and I am thinking of Leeds, because the pressure, whoever they face, that pressure is on. And Ellen Road is everything to them this season. And that's it's just, whenever you look at the fixture, you think, how's this going to work out? I've been confident that Forest would stay up. I mean, obviously, the start of the season, I thought they'd be mid-table, but staying up, I did, a couple of weeks ago, I did feel, oh my gosh, they might actually go here. But getting the point at City and the win at Spurs completely changed my mind.
Yeah, after Brighton, I thought we might go, definitely. Yeah. Sorry, Adam.
Brighton, yeah.
I think you also have to factor in with Forest is Europe as well. That that you call it a distraction, a nice distraction, but it's something else to factor in. It does ask more of the players when they've got that midweek travel. So if they were to get through to the semi-final, and then of course there'll be huge interest in an all Premier League, all Midlands semi-final in the Europa League as well. So that's something else that could factor in. But it's funny, while you guys were talking, I was looking at what date that Forest game at West Ham was played, because I remember then the feeling was after that. I think it was early January. I've got it here somewhere, but it was much earlier than I thought, because I remember afterwards I know quite a few West Ham fans, and they were like, "We're down. That's it. We're finished." And you look how things can change now. West Ham fans are probably more up. I know they lost their last game, but they've had some encouraging results recently. Not brilliant results, but encouraging results, and they certainly seem to be playing better. But it just shows you how. And I mean, I live in the Nottingham area, so I speak to a lot of Forest fans as well. And the amount of times it's been, we're down, that's it, we're finished. And then suddenly you get a result like you do, and everyone's back up again. It's like, we can do it again now. So it's not a long time to go, but it is a long time to go in terms of how football works, in terms of the number of games left. So there's a lot still can happen, but I retain that faith that I've always had that Forest. And again, I go back to what I said when the first question you asked me. And I look at the character and the minerals and the energy, the tenacity that I'm seeing from Forest players, the unity, togetherness, all these things that I think are so important in a relegation battle. And I see that they seem to have it under Pereira, which is a huge credit to him, the impact that he seems to have made on those things in the short time that he's been there. And that for me is a fundamental reason why I would be backing Forest to stay up.
I don't know, Matt, if it helps you or not, but the fact that Leeds have to face West Ham on the last game of the season, I mean, goodness me, goodness where we'll be at that point. And Leeds have to go to Spurs as well. I don't know if is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I'm just trying to work it out. Also, the fact that you mentioned the Europa League, Adam mentioned the Europa League there. I mean, West Ham are playing Leeds in the FA Cup, and therefore,
someone's going.
One of those is then not playing on the weekend of the 18th. Which is because, as it stands, I'm set to do Palace West Ham, but that game, what day that's played, depends if West Ham go through. Leeds have Wolves. So, in one of those games, probably going to move. Am I right, Adam? I think that's quarterfinal weekend. I mean, not quarterfinal weekend. I think is that the.
I need to check that. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to check. I think it's that weekend that there's debate over. It's either that or it's related to Europe. I need to check that. But those two clubs are still in competition as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see what it does against the FA Cup semi-final for one of those clubs. if it plays into things. I think us getting to the FA Cup semi-final was a very small factor in our demise last season in the Premier League. We lost a lot of gas, I think, around that time. So yeah, that's the thing as well. Just on Leeds, we haven't done much on Leeds, but they do still have. They've got Wolves at home, Burnley at home, Brighton at home. They'll look at that and think great, but if they just lose a couple, you never know. They've got Bournemouth away. I know Seb has rightly said don't focus on fixtures, but Bournemouth are very strong at home. Their defensive record is very good, especially in terms of XG. So, yeah, and then that big game on the last day. So nothing's decided. There's narratives around every game. Like while you were talking, I was thinking like West Ham v Arsenal. If Arsenal have still got to win the Premier League, then it's a really tough game. If Arsenal won the league by then, then I'd be back West Ham, frankly. So yeah, there's stuff that just goes into every single match. It's pretty crazy, yeah. I think.
By the way, I think it's the weekend of the 25th. That I'm just looking at the fixtures. I think it's the weekend of the 25th. So either way, you potentially look at a situation, right at the back end of the season where they're not playing that weekend. Because let me just see. Yeah, so Leeds are at Bournemouth that weekend, for example. These games have to move somewhere depending on their FA Cup match. So we talk about, do Forest want to progress, but do West Ham or Leeds want to progress in that? Knowing that in the semi-final they're likely to play, Man United, or Liverpool, or Arsenal, or Chelsea. So problems for everyone.
We've got Sunderland that weekend for people who are listening. So a win there would be lovely, put some pressure on one of those teams. Right, we'll start to wrap things up shortly. Just a quick word of thanks for Global Telemetrics. I don't think either of these lads have seen a Global Telemetrics ad, so this could be a classic. I know. Thanks to Global Telemetrics for signing up for another 6 months as well. Huge thank you to them for their support. But we'll see you in just under a minute. Cinematic music is undoubtedly going to get pinged by the YouTube algorithm for copyright.
That was frightening. That was absolutely frightening. I was expecting, was it Kolasinac to come out?
If you're listening, not watching, they were nicking a car. It was a stolen Toyota Hilux, recovered before the customer had even woken up. So yeah, do check out Global Telemetrics if you want to secure your vehicle. And thanks again to those guys. Right, just rounding off as much as I can in about 7 minutes, because I've done my usual trick of saying we'll talk about one thing for 45 minutes and we could do 2 hours. Morgan Gibbs-White said, you watched England last night, not in the squad. I didn't watch the game. I hate friendlies. And I think Anderson did all right, as I thought he would. But is Morgan unlucky when you see how England are shaping up not to be in the squad, or are we just that good at number 10 that it's the way it is?
Yeah, it's the way it is. It's the area of the field that is absolutely clogged. And I think also the issue, in a strange way, is the fact that certain players aren't playing well. So you think of like a Phil Foden, but Tuchel's going to feel that pressure of, do I have to keep him in the mix? And it's easier for a manager to make a decision, I think, to say, a player like Morgan Gibbs-White, it's easier for me to leave them out if I don't think they're going to add a huge amount to the team than to leave a Phil Foden out because of the grief I get. Managers do care about this stuff, believe it or not. And as much as we like to say people don't notice this stuff, football clubs, organisations, they are aware of social media now. It's such a huge presence. It can't affect. So that's the issue that Morgan Gibbs-White has, is because he's not established in that England team before. He's now not going to make it. I mean, I think he offers something that players don't have. I think in a game like last night, for example, England played a system where they almost had a lot of ball-to-feet players in the middle. I mean, Morgan Rogers was played out on the right-hand side, and he had Palmer, Anderson, Mainu, and Foden all in the middle. Foden was almost a false nine. But at the end of the day, I remember Nico O'Reilly getting forward, playing a lovely clip crossing. I thought for a midfield breaker, that's Gibbs-White would be on that all day long. It's not Phil Foden's game to be attacking the ball with his head in the box, and it was Japanese defender got it away. So he does offer something. It's also that situation of, I think James Garner's got that as well. If you're not at one of the clubs that's getting all the headlines every week, again, you can be missed a bit. People aren't seeing it. And our role as commentators, we watch more 90 minutes than most people. So we get to see these players a lot. And I'm surprised people don't ask commentators to be scouts at times just to pick on a player. Because you see things, and Adam will know, you're covering leagues sometimes and you'll see a player and you think, he was talking about earlier, think, wow, this player I actually think would really work for this club in the Premier League. And then you see them go a different direction. You think, why have they done that? Why have they gone for that player? That's not right. Gibbs-White, that's the scenario he's in, and I think he's unfortunate. Whereas in Elliot Anderson's case, he got himself in a position where England were lacking a player, and now there are options in that area. I mentioned Garner and Mainu and Wharton. He's the number one in that role in the England team, and not only will he go to the World Cup, he's going to start the games.
I could have saved Spurs quite a few quid on Igor Tudor, to be honest. I mean, no offense, but I'd watch. I mean, anyone who'd watch, I'm not just saying about me, but anyone who'd watched his teams play would have said to you, "What is that about?" I think I was chatting about someone when he was appointed. I was like, if you'd given me 100 attempts to guess who it was, I would never have guessed Igor Tudor. It just, having seen his teams in Italy, you just think, I just didn't see how that fitted at all. No. So yeah, I totally take your point on that. you do maybe see things, but some are more obvious than others. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll move on from more. We'll just say he's got 9 Premier League goals, only 9 players in double figures, and he does offer a different dimension, I think, to a Foden. But I suppose Bellingham's the one who's a box crasher, all-round elite player, can do everything. He's just nailed that. But Morgan could be Bellingham light, I guess, which is a pretty big compliment, I think. But maybe he does miss out. Just on Anderson, looks like he's going to go. I know Forest fans hate it when we say that, but I think it feels realistic that with the accounts, if you can sell a player for 100 million quid or 90 million quid, and he can go to any club in the league, he's probably going to do it in Europe. So just quickly, Adam, are there any players that are out there that you think would fit the bill to come into a team like Forest, or is that an impossible task just to replace Elliot Anderson?
I think it is very difficult to replace him like for like. I'd have to sit down and have a good think about, players in particularly Italy, which is the sort of overseas league that I watch the most. But I don't think it's unreasonable to say that he probably will leave. I mean, there is a food chain in football after all. I mean, I know that clubs always want to keep hold of their best players. Of course they do. Of course the fans want to keep hold of their best players. It's totally understandable. And, I'd love to see him stay at Forest because I think they can build again next season. It would be great if he could be part of that. But, if a club like Man City slaps £100 million on the table, that's going to be very hard to turn down. So he's difficult to replace, very difficult just with one player to replace because of the skill set that he has. That's quite rare. He's somebody who, he can win the ball back, but he progresses it a lot. I mean, I had a guy on X the other day. I was saying that how England had missed him in that game the other day, and I said he sets the tempo and he progresses the ball, and this guy said to me, no, he doesn't progress the ball. And I think, what?
He's got the most poor passes and progressive passes.
Normally, I wouldn't even react to something, but you just think to yourself, am I watching some different player here? It's just amazing me sometimes because for me, he literally does progress the ball more than any other midfielder statistically in the Premier League. And I think that for me is when I've watched him play for England, and I know there isn't a huge body of work, but what I have seen is I've never really seen one player in the games across the piece that he's played in who's changed the way England plays so much. And that's because he's always thinking forward and he's always raising the tempo. Too many of the England games, particularly the friendlies, there's no there's no tempo to it. It's just pass it around, and the ball never really gets forward with any efficiency and speed. And I think that he really does look to do that. He can add more goals. I think he does need to do that. He needs to add more goals to his game. And I think he can do. That's probably another way that he gets to that next level, because I think he's, somebody who's got the potential to be amongst the absolute top midfielders in Europe. But I do think I know people will say, well, that's not really his game. And I totally take that point. But I do think he does need to add some goals to his game. But the way he progresses the ball, the way he sets the tempo, the energy that he brings, the way he protects the ball, his strength on the ball. I mean, we're looking at a really exceptional talent. And it's no surprise to see that, there's a lot of, apparently, Europe's top clubs are looking at him. But I'll have a think about that question in terms of players that I've watched in. I don't like to just give stuff off the hoof. But
Adam, what about Fratesi? I know there were links. I think there were some links to him.
Yeah, he's a different player.
Could you get him out? Yeah, could you get him out of?
Yes, I think you could
Forest.
Yeah, I think you could get him out of Inter. I think there was a real serious interest from what I hear in him, and they didn't get it over the line. But the thing with Fratesi is, I think if you're using him to his best, he is a box crasher. That's for me where you want to be using him. You want to be getting him in and around the box as much as you possibly can. I mean, people look at him sometimes and say, oh, he could play as maybe I don't see him as that at all. I think if you want to get the best out of Fratesi, you get him fairly close to the centre forward. I mean, I look at the type of goal that he scored in the Champions League semi-final last season, just for instance, where he pops up in the box. It was a nice finish in that Inter Barcelona game. I've seen him score goals. Spalletti liked him for Italy when he was the manager of Italy. And he would very often, if he had a sitting two, he would be in front of them. And I think that's probably where it might be that Forest don't just go out and say, right, let's try and get a like-for-like Elliot Anderson replacement, because that's going to be really hard to do, certainly to the level that he's at. So it might be that they look at it and go, well, can we go and get a couple of players that do slightly different things? Can we, tinker with the blend of the midfield? I mean, who knows what will happen with Morgan Gibbs-White? This time last year, or we were thinking that maybe he would be heading off, and it nearly happened to Spurs. So there's a lot of moving parts, isn't there, in terms of Forest and their recruitment and what they look to do and the type of profiles of players that they look to sign. I mean, a player that I've mentioned a couple of times to you on here that I really like in Italy is Ravella at Lazio, but sadly he's barely played this season. He's been injured nearly all season. He's still injured. But he's a player that he's not an Elliot Anderson like-for-like replacement, but he's a central midfielder that I do really like. I mean, there's players out there.
I mean, a player, and Borough fans won't like me for saying this. I mean, I don't know if somebody's going to take a chance on Hayden Hackney as an English midfielder who's tidy on the ball. We haven't seen him in the Premier League, to see if he can test himself in that way. But that could be the way to go. It's so difficult to find that player. I mean, Elliot Anderson, as I said, when he was at Newcastle, he was a player that was moved around the pitch. I saw him play at wing back. I saw him play, the deep area, right up the pitch on the wing. He was everywhere for them. But he's settled into this role that fits him perfectly at Forest, and has created this player that I don't think many saw him being that type of player. They knew he had a lot of ability, but what Forest have been able to do from the platform they've been able to give him. So maybe that might work for another player. And obviously it helps if it's a player who knows how to mix it. Whether that's Hayden Hackney, I mean, Middlesbrough are obviously in the promotion race. But if for any reason that they were looking to cash in on him, then he might be an option, perhaps.
A couple of central midfielders that from Serie A.
Started the ball rolling here.
I start as you're asking me the question. I'm sort of thinking of players again who not necessarily replace him like for like, but Fagioli at Fiorentina, who was at Juventus. He's had a really good season. I really like him. He's maturing as well. It's a shame that it didn't work out for him at Juventus. I always thought that it would do there, but for one reason or another it didn't. But he's gone to Fiorentina and he's done really well. And I think that I would be amazed if there weren't clubs looking at him. He's a very, very stylish player, very elegant on the ball. Whether he'd be a fit for the Premier League, I mean, that's another debate. We'd have to look at that and analyse that in terms of, again, looking at things like physicality, etc. But one who I think is another who's going to attract a lot of interest in the summer is Manu Kone, the French international at Roma. He's a very good player, and he has got the physicality as well. I really like him, and I mean, Roma will do well if they can keep hold of him. You know, they're trying to build, they're trying to get back in the Champions League. They want to contend for the Scudetto, so they'd be very reluctant, I would think, if they're serious about building like that, to lose a player like him. But there are a couple of names. Fagioli is probably the more gettable of the two of them, because I think that Kone will probably end up, I think Inter have been very interested in him for quite a while. But there's a couple of names, but yeah, Elliot Anderson is going to be so tough to replace if he does leave, isn't he?
Here you go, Matt. A couple more. If Leeds and West Ham go down, then they should try and make a play, I think, for Anton Stack at Leeds, and also Fernandez at West Ham. I know he's just joined. He only joined them at the start of the campaign. But if those players go down, I just think they're players that would dominate the Championship. So maybe are a target in the same way that I think, Brighton got Ruter, in that sort of situation. That might be something to look at. Again, no offence to Leeds and West Ham.
No, I mean, Andre and João Gomez are also good players in a bad team as well. There are players there, even the Brentford mids like Yarmouk and Janel are good players. The unrealistic one that I love, that the only way it'd be in 1% possible is if we won the Europa League and got in the Champions League, is Alex Scott at Bournemouth. But even he's destined for way bigger things because he's a top player. The reason I asked this question, angling towards the whole thing, is I want to hear Seb commentate on a Danilo goal again. He scored for Brazil on debut last night against Croatia. A real box crasher goal. Him and Sangare as a midfield too.
New hairstyle as well. New hairstyle.
He's bulked up. Yeah. He looks he was quite lean when he was at Forest, and obviously he had that awful injury, but he's gone back to Botafogo, who, as previously mentioned, do seem to have a few slight issues at the moment. So could be a deal to be done if people want to go back and bring him back. But I always liked Danilo, and if he's bigger and quicker and stronger, then you never know. Before we wrap things up, quick word of thanks for Rockcore. As you'll know, we've been promoting the gig that's coming up on April the 8th, Tiny Temper at Rock City. You can only get a ticket by volunteering, and I spoke to two of the volunteers who are taking part in one of the projects, and they've secured their tickets for the gig and done something good for their community and for themselves in Rue and Morgan. So here's what they had to say about the show and why they're volunteering and what they got out of it.
It's going to be amazing. His concerts are incredible. Going to be great. He's a very big, all of his music's very party music, so the vibes are going to be immaculate.
It's really nice. You get an enormous sense of well-being, as well as the fact that you could say, oh, I have contributed something towards my community, and you've helped something become something better.
It's hard to find somewhere that has such a sense of community, and to feel like you're part of something and doing something positive is really nice.
Yeah, it's definitely a meaningful experience. Yeah. It's a really, really good way to get started into volunteering if you don't know where to begin, but you also will get a lot out of it. It's not like just going and you're working constantly. It is an experience as well. Like, you get to meet new people and gain new experiences as well.
Right, I'm going to wrap things up with one final quick question for the chaps, but just before that, if you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, do consider membership or Patreon. If you're a member or a patron, you have early access to things like this that are pre-recorded, or a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify would be great. Final question for both of you before we go. I've kept you way too long, I appreciate. Anyone who listens to Matt Ford episode will know that I did a talk for some kids at a primary school the other day. Lots of questions that went totally off the rails. One of them was, what's your favourite and least favourite chocolate bar? We discussed it on the pod. I got loads of heat for saying my least favourite chocolate bar. So I won't say it here. I want to hear what these chaps say. So just really quickly, because I know I've kept you too long. Seb Hutchinson, what is your favourite chocolate bar? What is your least favourite chocolate bar?
Oh, goodness me. I mean, I try to avoid chocolate as much as possible because I love it so much. Always milk. I'm not a big dark chocolate fan. And I used to love Whispers because of the texture. I love bubbly texture inside. But I have to say, if somebody asked me straight away what chocolate would I take right now, it's the Lindor bulls.
Oh, a man of class. I like it. Very good.
Hang on.
The creamy interior. That's a bit too much for Adam. That answer. The cream. Oh, there they are. The pistachio. Oh my goodness. When in Switzerland last year for the Women's Euros, I went to the factory. Not the factory. Well, it's the factory shop essentially, and they had a pick and mix of all the bulls. And can you imagine?
East Midlands Designer Outlet's got that, I think.
Has it got that as well? Oh, I should have. Don't tempt me. I'm trying to avoid this stuff. But yeah, absolute class chocolate bull.
What about, this is the one that promotes trouble though. What, is there a chocolate you would avoid? One that you think, no, thank you, not for me?
I wasn't a massive fan of Bounties when I was younger. I just didn't think they go together. I'm not a massive fan of Turkish Delight. Anything. I don't like chocolate being mixed with fruits necessarily. I think it's not for me. For me, chocolate needs to stay with sort of dairy product items, nuts, and honeycomb fillings. Crunchies. I mean, this. I'm much more engaged in this than I am about who's going to be Elliot Anderson's replacement.
This is the thing that we could do as an offshoot.
This is such a hard question to answer without ultimately sounding a bit partridge, isn't it?
I said
that's commentary as well, though, isn't it?
You've watched this podcast. I mean, I said Mintero and got dogs abuse for saying Mintero, but Turkish Delight will be in there as well. So, Adam, finish the podcast off with your favourite and least favourite chocolate.
Well, as I've already demonstrated there, I like a bit of Lindt myself. I would say, God, this is really tough. Again, I'm sounding like partridge. I would say I used to love Toblerone, but I try and avoid that now. After driving to Dundee in my bare feet, any Partridge fans will get that reference. Boost or double decker, I'm going to go for.
Oh, nice. I can't believe how much flack I got for saying Mintero. I just don't like mint in chocolate. So.
I'm really with Seb on Bounties. I'm not into Bounties, not into Turkish Delight either. And I'm not a massive fan on anything, on nuts in a chocolate bar, per se. Nougat, yeah. So double decker, but yeah, double decker or boost. Problem with a boost is when you put it in the fridge, because I like chocolate cold, but when you put a boost in the fridge,
that's pulling your teeth out.
It goes too hard, doesn't it? So you end up like dipping it in a brew or something to sort of melt it again, but then that defeats the object of it being in the fridge, and you're like,
Which is why this Easter time, I think Easter eggs for me should go in the fridge, not for too long, but just enough. Just enough. It's the break. If you make it too soft, it becomes a congealed thing you can just squash in your hands, and it's a
have it out of the fridge. It's because of the thickness of it that it adds to it when it's been in the fridge. Yeah, 100% Easter egg chocolate. It's got to come out of the fridge. Yeah, well
that's
said.
Fuming.
Yeah, we've had chocolate in the fridge debate for years as well. So you've stumbled on it. As we're ending, you've pulled the pin on the hand grenade and just walked away.
Yeah, would have been nice on my last ever show anyway.
I said to the lads before we started, are you like 45 minutes? We've done an hour, and I thought I was taking the piss of their time, but I feel this is the most engaged they've been in any podcast appearance they've ever done. So.
Well, when you're talking about players, XG and how many starts they've had in a season, sometimes just a bit of light relief is always helpful.
Yeah, a change of pace is always needed. Right, thanks very much to Adam and Seb. Really appreciate it. I enjoyed this conversation very much. Do hit like before you go. We're back tomorrow either with hearing from the regulars from West Ham, Leeds and Spurs on how those lads are feeling, or I've got an interview with a Forest fan called Adam Walker, who, if you Google him, a really interesting chap, swims across the oceans for a living, I guess, weirdly. But all 7 oceans, interesting life, swum with sharks, stung by a Portuguese man of war, and he's a big Forest fan as well, so we talk a bit of football. So do check either of those out, and then normal service resumes on Monday. This has been a lovely break these last 2 weeks. I really enjoyed it. So, thanks for Adam. Thanks to Seb. Do hit like before you go. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.